Do you feel that your relationship has changed since the birth of your first child? Do you find yourself disagreeing more with your significant other than you did before kids? And do you wonder if being at odds in your relationship will affect your children? So the big question is this: how do we navigate through the mountain of overwhelming, often contradictory, and sometimes false parenting information we find online? What parenting information should you believe and apply, and what should you reject? That is the big question, and in this podcast, we will help you understand what underlies your child's behavior and explain how to react in a way that favors your child's optimal development. I'm Alexandra Scherzer, and welcome to Dr. Solomon's Wisdom. In many families, the arrival of a firstborn child involves a lot of excitement, a lot of planning, and a lot of looking forward to. Parents, family, and friends help choose and gather furniture and baby accessories. Expecting parents paint the nursery and buy baby clothes and diapers. But despite all of this planning and great anticipation, it's a fact that the couple's relationship frequently takes a hit after the baby arrives. And that's what we'll be talking about today. In fact, why a couple's relationship takes a hit has been studied quite extensively, and understanding why this can easily happen to you can help you to prevent the deterioration of your relationship. And so, why exactly are we talking about a couple's relationship? Well, remaining a loving couple rather than becoming just mom and dad is not only good for you, but good for your child. A major point that we want to get across in today's episode is that the health of your relationship has a strong influence on your child's development. So I didn't know that there are some well-known reasons that a couple's relationship goes downhill after the birth of their first child. Just being aware of the signs that your relationship might be getting into trouble can help you to head them off. If you feel like your relationship is difficult at times in a way that it didn't used to be, then listen in, because we're going to go over the signs to look out for and how to cope when you see these signs occurring in your life. So let's start by going over some well-known and well-researched reasons that a couple's relationship goes downhill after the birth of the first child. So what are these major sources?
The first thing I should say is that the relationship will inevitably change because there's a third person in the family. But just because it changes doesn't mean that your relationship will go downhill. What we're talking about today are 5 specific conditions that may surface when parents welcome their first baby. If not dealt with properly, these conditions can easily pull your relationship into a downward spiral. The research shows that initially there is what has been called a baby honeymoon. During this period, there is so much excitement about the baby that the couple really doesn't pay much attention to what is happening to their own relationship. And, for the most part, parents expect and even want the baby to be the center of their lives after having anticipated the baby's arrival for so long. According to the literature, this baby honeymoon lasts about 6 months, and then the parents become aware that their relationship has changed. They become aware that they are definitely not interacting and feeling the same way as they did before the baby came along. So we mentioned there are 5 conditions which may turn into sources for problems. Here's the first. It has to do with who does what in the house. What this means is that with the arrival of the baby, who does the cooking, who does the cleaning, who does the laundry, who does the vacuuming, who makes the appointments, etc., 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 may become a source of tension depending on whether the couple reorganizes the responsibilities for the various chores. What the research has found is that women find themselves unhappy in the relationship before men do. After a few months, a mother will sort of look around and realize that in addition to looking after her baby, she still has all these household tasks that she's responsible for. Even if not unhappy, women notice the changes in the relationship in relationship before men do. So back to the research that shows women noticing the changes first. Some couples may work through the change by sitting down and planning out a new division of tasks, whereas other couples may reorganize more spontaneously. Overall, if this reorganization doesn't take place or doesn't happen in a way that satisfies both parents, then it can affect their relationship in a negative way. Also, the father very often feels that he's knocking himself out to do more things than his father did with the baby and around the house, but it never seems to be enough. All the while, the mother feels she needs more help. Most mothers I've spoken to recognize themselves in what I've just described. What's important is how the couple handles these changes, and whether or not they are able to work together to find an agreement where both parents are content. The second and potential source of problems has to do with who does what with the baby. The research shows that the mother feels that she is doing more of the unpleasant tasks related to the baby, such as changing dirty diapers, trying to feed a baby that doesn't want to eat, cleaning up after the baby throws up, doing errands with a fussy baby in tow, etc. While the father does more of the pleasant tasks, like reading a book to the baby, playing with the baby, and taking the baby out for walks. The third and potential source of problems is closely related to the previous one and has to do with the mother feeling she has more responsibility for caring for the baby than he does. In many families, the father says to the mother, "How can I help you?" instead of deciding to take on and do various tasks himself. Even though asking how to help shows that he really wants to help, which is a good thing, the mother feels in this situation like she can never relax. So why does being asked how you can be helped make you feel overwhelmed and resentful? It's because the mother is always thinking and planning. She's always on call and being asked for solutions. Even if the father's help helps her physically, mentally she still feels like she is working. If not dealt with properly, this can easily lead to her feeling overwhelmed and resentful towards the father. What's important is for both the father and the mother to communicate about who's doing what with the baby and who is taking full responsibility for certain tasks. Let's start with the mother and what she can do to maintain good communication in this context. She should voice when she needs some relief from taking care of the baby and not suppress her irritation. Expressing herself with statements that start with I is a good way to start. For example, I would like you to change her more often, rather than saying something like, you never change her. Another example would be to say, I would like you to be responsible for bath time instead of, you never bathe her. As to fathers, they simply don't parent the same way as mothers do. He often asks for help because he doesn't know what to do or how to do it. This is one area in which mothers have to recognize that fathers are different from mothers. So instead of letting her resentment grow, with good communication, the mother can instruct the father as how to do certain tasks. Some fathers will need more instruction than others, but working together to find a good balance is the foundation for a stronger relationship between the parents. Now for fathers. It is important that he should recognize and express empathy and acknowledgement for the tasks that the mother is doing day in and day out. Looking after a baby is a tremendous task, especially when it's a first baby. It would be helpful for him to say that he wants to undertake responsibility for certain tasks, such that he doesn't have to ask her for any explanation or clarification about how to do them. To recap, when looking after the household tasks and when looking after the baby become too much for the father or the mother, the relationship takes a hit. And a very important point is that problems related to with who does what with the baby or with the household chores end up blocking communication. So for the past 3 points, we've been telling you that parents should communicate more. But the literature tells us that parents who are experiencing these problems have difficulty communicating. What this means is whether you're having difficulty or not, knowing that these problems actually work to block communication should make you much more aware and make you work harder to communicate positively in order for your relationship not to take a hit. The fourth condition, a potential source of problem, is that the mother is more involved with the baby than the father is, so their interests start to diverge. So here, what happens is that the mother's life revolves a great deal around the baby and the baby's activities. A great deal of her attention and her energy and her emotions are taken up by the baby. As a result, this is what she ends up thinking about and talking about. On the other hand, although he is interested in the baby, it isn't to the same extent that the mother is. Therefore, what he thinks about and talks about is more diverse and revolves less around the baby. The danger here is that if not dealt with properly, each will start to half listen to the other because their interests are diverging. What's important here is that parents recognize that this can happen, that they can become more different from each other and slowly drift apart. Despite the changing interests, it's important to work on remaining interested in what the other wants to share with you. This way you can help prevent your relationship from taking a hit. The fifth condition and potential source of problems is that both parents are tired. They're too tired to have nice conversations, too tired to be patient with each other, and too tired to pay a lot of attention to each other. When either or both parents are so tired, communication becomes much more important. Although it may require more effort and energy, it's important that you pay attention to each other even when you're extremely tired. If you're too tired to do this, it's important for you to say so and offer another time to listen. It's important not to let your exhaustion completely take over and prevent good communication. Good communication doesn't mean that you are always available to talk. Sometimes it means to simply express that you were feeling too tired without making the other person feel bad, neglected, or less important. Communication is both verbal and nonverbal. Some nonverbal communications that may be red flags are frequently not eating together or walking away when the other is speaking. So again, what's important if one or both parents are extremely tired is to focus on good and positive communication so that your relationship stays on track. The last condition and potential source of problems has to do with different ideas on child raising. There are many influences on how parents perceive how they should raise their child. A major one is how they were raised themselves. We've talked about this before in another episode, but I'll bring it up again here. Everyone has an inner parent who is telling them how to raise their child the way they were raised. Parents either want to raise the child they were raised, in which case their parenting and their inner parenting are in sync, or they want to raise their child differently from how they were raised, in which case their parenting is working against their inner parent. When a parent would like to raise their child differently from how they were raised, it's difficult to do so because, again, they end up being in conflict with themselves. So back to the couple. Each parent is going through this. Every parent, whether they are aware of it or not, is either in line or going against their inner parent. On top of this, it's possible that each parent has different ideas about child raising, either overall or in specific conditions. So if not dealt with properly, the differing ideas on child raising can lead to conflict between the parents. What's important here is for the parents to communicate positively and reach a consensus on child rearing. Some aspects of child rearing and some relationships will need more communication than others. If this isn't done, the relationship can take a hit.
So, aside from how being unhappy in your relationship affects you as an individual and affects your couple relationship, how does being unhappy in your relationship, the health of your relationship, affect your child's development?
Well, first, when we as humans are upset about something, it affects our behavior and it affects the people around us. It particularly affects the people we live with, as we just saw with the potential red flags. But even more particularly, it affects our children. What often happens when a couple is unhappy is that both parents become less sensitive to each other, and this sets them up to behave and react in ways that they wouldn't want their child to. Without intending to, parents end up modeling behavior that they wouldn't want their child to adopt. We talk about the strong influence of modeling in another episode, but basically, babies and children are hardwired to watch how their parents act and react to events. Arguing with and withdrawing from your significant other, as well as not being in a good mood, starts a vicious circle with your child. Over time, what happens is that your child watches and then imitates your negative behavior. Then your child acts in ways that you don't like, and you become more and more disappointed in your child. This makes helping your child to grow up to be the person you wish much more difficult. Of course, there are many other influences on your child's behavior, but the health of your relationship is a major one, a very important one. Second, the parents are not only less sensitive to each other, but they are also less sensitive to their child when a child expresses a need for something. Now, keep in mind that children often express a need very indirectly or even with negative behavior. So it's very hard for parents to understand what their child is really expressing when they are less sensitive because their relationship is in trouble. And when parents are unhappy, it's very hard for them to be empathetic with their child. Parents who are less sensitive to the child are also less likely to help their child come out of each developmental stage in the best possible way. We talk about the crucial stages that every child must go through in another episode, but briefly, as of day one, there is a specific sequence of developmental stages that every child will go through. Let me try to explain how developmental stages work so that you can get a bird's eye view of how the strength of your relationship influences how your child develops. Imagine that at the beginning of each stage, your child will receive specific blocks related to that stage. As he goes through the stage, he receives either a red block or a blue block for each interaction he experiences. If he receives more red blocks than blue blocks by the end of the stage, then he will end that stage in one way. If he receives more blue blocks, then he will end that stage in a different way. Every developmental stage has a set of red blocks and blue blocks specifically related to that stage. And for every stage, one set leads to a more positive outcome than the other set. Each and every interaction and experience that your child lives during that developmental stage determines which block your child will receive for that interaction. If he receives more blocks for a positive outcome, then he will come out of the stage successfully, as we refer to it in child psychology. He is then poised to go through the next stage with success. Essentially, success begets success. The important point about developmental stages and how the health of your relationship affects your child's development is that your child will go through these crucial identity forming stages and will end each stage in a different way, depending in part on your relationship.
So now that we've heard about how the health of the parents' relationship affects their child's development, it sounds easier said than done for a couple to simply communicate well.
Yes, well, if you were listening to this episode and you have a lot of disagreements with your significant other, then I understand that it may be difficult for you to change how you are reacting with the other, acting and reacting. It also isn't easy to hear how the health of your relationship may be affecting your child's development. No parents want this to happen. This being said, knowing how your relationship affects your child's development and being able to identify the sources of your problems can actually be of great help in changing your path. Now that you've heard some of the main sources of problems during this period of life, you probably can identify which one is most effectively diminishing your relationship. If you can identify them, then you can address them and work to keep them from affecting your life and your child's development.
Okay, so that wraps up our episode on the importance of the health of your relationship on your child's development. Speaking from experience, there is no doubt that having a baby changes your relationship. What's important is for both parents to be happy with their new normal. And seeing as children grow and develop constantly, this new normal is constantly changing. So finding a positive, common ground with your significant other truly is a work in progress. With respect to our wise parenting formula, today's episode was all about the S and the E. The S stands for being self-aware. Here, it means being aware of what you are doing to help contribute to a positive relationship with your significant other. It also means being in tune with what your significant other is feeling. And it also means being aware of what may be threatening your relationship. Even if you are able to control your emotions, it's still important to be able to identify what bothers or irritates you so that you can address it and communicate positively about it. And this is where the E for education comes in the wise parenting formula. Education, in this case, means knowing what some main sources of problems in a relationship are. What the information tells us is that identifying, keeping an eye on, and communicating about your feelings in a positive way will help you to keep your relationship from going downhill. No matter where your relationship stands, or whether we've touched on what's bothering you in particular, I hope that in us addressing this topic, you realize that what is happening to you is very common and has been well researched. You are definitely not alone. We hope that you found today's podcast helpful. Come say hi on social. Our Facebook and Instagram accounts are at Dr. Solomon's Wisdom, all one word. You can subscribe to the Wise Parenting Podcast on any podcast app, including Spotify, the Apple and Google podcast apps, or wherever you listen. Parenting advice keeps changing on us, depending on what you read and who you listen to. This is making parents feel like they're doing a bad job. And worst of all, many parents today don't know who to trust for what is probably the most important job they'll ever have. So if you're the parent of a young child and you would like to feel clearer, more confident, and more at ease about your parenting decisions, then the Wise Parenting Academy can help you get there. With on-demand access to foundation lectures and seminars in digital, print, and audio, as well as exclusive one-on-one guidance from Dr. Solomon, the Wise Parenting Academy is the perfect next step to building the best long-term outcomes for your child. Come check us out at thewiseparentingacademy.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us again.